Breaking news of the Senate now formally subpoenaing Michael Cohen today. This comes, of course, after he had bailed on the planned public testimony. So they are looking at a date of February 12th. That's 3 weeks before Cohen is supposed to report to prison for a 3-year sentence. Now, Cohen says he had backed off the voluntary testimony because Trump was threatening his family. The reports today are he is upset about this new demand. A source saying Cohen views this pressure as, quote, lacking compassion and ignoring Cohen's concern and fear for his family's safety. Beyond that leak about the subpoena, on the record, Cohen's legal advisor, Lanny Davis, suggesting they don't want to fight the entire subpoena, but there may be debates over how they comply and what comes next. Now, the timing is the story here. The Republican Senate chair has said the whole goal is to get Cohen to testify with that date before going to prison because he notes, quote, it's very difficult to interview people in jail. Now, that's not just rhetoric. There's actually some bipartisan agreement on Cohen's potential testimony right now. I can report for you that tonight because you have leaders in both parties saying, look, he's got to face Congress regardless of jail. Here is Democratic Chair Elijah Cummings.
What about when he goes to jail? Can we get him if he goes to jail?
Of course we can. Of course. Whatever we have to do to get him here, we're going to do it.
President Trump, meanwhile, not the only one attacking Cohen. Another former Trump aide caught up in this same Mueller probe, Michael Caputo, argued right here at this table last night that if Cohen testifies, he would just, quote, lie again.
Michael Cohen is an inveterate liar, and it's been proven so. He's been found guilty of lying. I think he'll continue to lie and say whatever he needs to cut his sentence down as far as possible.
I'm joined now by phone by Lanny Davis, Michael Cohen's legal advisor, who's been on this show before and telegraphed some of where we were headed. Lanny, have you seen Michael in person today? How is he doing? Will he testify? And what is important in your view about what's come out?
Yes, I have seen him. He's in considerable pain and difficulty because of his recent surgery. I put out a public statement that, of course, the subpoena will be complied with, but the terms and dates and details of subpoena, as everybody knows, are always subject to reasonable discussions. But we respect the Senate Intelligence Committee and the House Intelligence Committee, who also wants Mr. Cohen to come in. And I have to add,
Go ahead.
I have to add that we greatly respect and appreciate Mr. Cummings and wanted to do that public testimony on February 7th. And the highest priority was to do that testimony, and I know what he would have said. But Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani, if I could talk about Mr. Giuliani first, because he doesn't have the arguably immune position of a president. He committed a crime, as far as I'm concerned, an indictable, at least crime, by threatening and impugning a man's family as a way of getting into the man's brain. We've seen that in movies in Godfather 2, how you can silently threaten somebody, and it's a mob tactic that Mr. Schiff, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, Mr. Cummings, put out in a public statement last night.
Well,
so there's genuine fear about going on in the Cohen family.
Lanny, and I understand that you're saying that with the full, genuine view, and that's why I asked if you were with Mr. Cohen today, and you're describing what you're seeing. I don't quibble with that. You mentioned Godfather 2. That's a situation where you have also congressional hearings and you have a star witness's family member brought into the hearings. But as you know, Mr. Davis, the clear implication in Godfather 2 was of the threat of violence or murder. Here, the threat appears to be, as I understand your allegation of the crime, that Donald Trump would use investigative resources to target members of Mr. Cohen's family, or are you alleging something beyond that?
No, I'm saying what everybody knows is that there are millions of people in this country with access to firearms who engage in violence and hear violent words and violent threats that we saw in Charlottesville. And we know that these things can happen. I'm not accusing Donald Trump of physically threatening, but in Godfather 2, when Santangelo was about to tell the Senate about Michael Corleone ordering a murder, they brought up Mr. Santangelo's brother from Sicily, and all he did was sit in the back of the room, and the silence was enough to be threatening.
So I want to make sure I understand, because you mentioned, yes, we're talking, I guess it's 2019, and this is how these interviews go, but we're talking Godfather 2 in the back of the room, the hearing room, but we're also talking Charlottesville, where, as you mentioned, an individual was murdered, according to authorities, and you're saying that you think the words of the president in public would encourage potential vigilante-style violence, or is there something more you're alluding to that was beyond what Donald Trump said in the Fox interview, et cetera, about Cohen's family?
Well, first of all, I'm describing the emotional thoughts of a father-in-law from Ukraine who's been here for 45 years and is called out by Rudy Giuliani as having links to organized crime because he's from Ukraine. That's Mr. Trump's lawyer, who has no immunity, and that's witness tampering on its face. Secondly, you have Mr. Trump, President of the United States, calling Michael Cohen a rat. That's a mob term for somebody who tells the truth to the government, and he praises people refusing to cooperate. And the message being sent, at least according to the family members, is fear. And while we can try to be rational about whether there should be fear or not be fear, I can tell you from firsthand knowledge that the father-in-law of Michael is the father of his wife. His wife has been directly called out by the President of the United States as if she's a criminal. She's been named in 2 of his tweets. They are fearful. The children are fearful. His parents are fearful. And so that was what was going on.
Understood. And I just wanted to pin down, Lanny, exactly the nature of what you're saying, and I understand it. I have Congressman Eric Swalwell, who's going to join this conversation with you. He, of course, is on both the Judiciary and Intelligence Committees. Congressman, thank you for joining me. I want to put one more question to Mr. Davis here with you, both listening and visible to our audience, because I think it comes to the crux of it. And that is, Lanny, when you say that a subpoena can be complied with, but you'll work out the details, are you able tonight to commit on the record to Mr. Cohen testifying to Congress before he goes to jail, or are you not ready to commit to that?
I'm not ready to commit to that because I haven't had a chance to talk to Mr. Cohen about his medical condition and other issues that he's worried about. I am authorized to say that a subpoena is very serious, and Mr. Cohen respects the Senate Intelligence Committee. He has already owned up to the fact that he lied about one issue to conform his story to what he understood Mr. Trump wanted him to say, and that was a lie, and he's owned up to it, and he's going to prison because of it, and the same thing in the House. But I can't tonight commit to anything before we engage in some reasonable conversations. I'm not a criminal defense lawyer, so it will have to be another lawyer that will be joining me in that.
Understood. Stay with me, Lanny. Congressman, we turn to you. Is that good enough, or in the view of the House, does a subpoena mean within a reasonable time and before this individual reports to incarceration?
Well, a subpoena means a subpoena, and I'll leave that to Mr. Schiff and Mr. Cummings. But if I could talk to Mr. Cohen, I would talk to him just like I would talk to any gang witness that I worked with as a prosecutor. And I would say, Mr. Cohen, you've already done the hard part. You've broken away from the mob. You've told the truth. You've come clean. Don't allow this bully of a president to get his way. He is a paper tiger, and you will be protected by special counsel. Congress, I know, would do everything it could to make accommodations, but the best thing you can do is to just tell the truth and stand up once and for all to this bully.
And what do you think, Congressman, I know you were listening in as part of our reporting, of what Mr. Davis, as Cohen's advisor, just said, that there is a view, there is what he described as genuine fear, not only of meddling or investigative techniques by the president. Richard Nixon got in trouble for that kind of abuse of power, but of the idea that someone might hear the president's words and act violently. Does that strike you as a legitimate concern or really beyond the pale tonight?
So it's a legitimate concern, but it would be more legitimate if the Democrats did not control the House of Representatives. But the days of mob rule are over. We are no longer powerless. We are able to stop this type of intimidation, this type of tampering, this type of obstruction, and finally hold the president accountable. So I know for me it's hard too, because I have to remind myself, hey, we don't have to go to the streets anymore to protest all of this stuff. We can actually do the work on the inside and be a balance of power against the check of against abuses of power.
So let me let Mr. Davis respond to that, and then on the other side of this, I want to play for both of you Congressman Nunes's alternative view of all this. But first, Lanny, you're here obviously by phone. I want to give you the benefit of response.
Well, I just want to thank the congressman. He's not only right about the power of truth and the bravery that Mr. Cohen has shown starting on July 2nd in his first interview with Mr. Stephanopoulos. He is dedicated to the truth, and what I know that he knows is the reason why Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani and the White House are so desperate to try to block him from telling the truth, and attacking his father-in-law and his wife shows desperation. I also want to thank the congressman for correctly saying that the way that bullies, especially a bully in the bully pulpit, soiling the presidency by using Twitter to call out a man's family, something that should be a purple bipartisan moment for our country. Pro or anti-Trump, family is out of bounds, except for one person in the Oval Office and his lawyer, who seems mentally unbalanced to me at times, who calls out a man from the Ukraine and says he has connections to organized crime. This is a former prosecutor. I'd like to thank the congressman for pointing out you only embolden bullies by letting them get away with.
What do you mean by calling Rudy Giuliani, quote, mentally unbalanced?
I believe he is mentally unbalanced by the words that he utters. If you watched him on a rival network this past Sunday, where he links a man who's 45 years in this country, an elderly gentleman, without any evidence whatsoever, and says he has links to organized crime because he comes from the Ukraine, and Mr. Trump, the President of the United States, alludes to him having legal problems without telling anything further about what facts.
And I understand how serious that is. But you're talking about evidence. You're making quite an allegation about what might be effectively your opposing counsel. You're saying he's mentally unbalanced. You don't have evidence for that, though, do you, Lanny?
I'm only giving you my personal reaction to watching his performance on TV, and I don't need to offer other examples, but what I saw on Sunday did not strike me as mental stability. That's my impression.
Understood. Let me play, as promised, a Republican congressman's view of this. Congressman Swalwell, you know Congressman Nunes. I think our viewers know some of the ways he's approached his investigative role. But let's listen to his view dismissing Mr. Cohen's concerns. Take a look.
I would love to have Cohen in Congress answering some of these tough questions. Saying that he's getting threatened seems pretty silly to me. We wanted Cohen to come in, so I think this is all, it makes no sense that he's using the excuse that he's been threatened. That doesn't make sense.
Congressman Swalwell.
We had Michael Cohen testify before our committee, and when we wanted to follow up on his account of what had happened, because we now know he was not being truthful at the time, we were blocked at every single step. So we could have, corroborated or contradicted Mr. Cohen when Mr. Nunes was the chairperson. He didn't do that, and I think part of the reason that the voters gave us the majority, in addition to health care and jobs, is also about ending the corruption in Washington and having, again, a balance of power against these abuses. And so we're gonna answer these questions.
Congressman Eric Swalwell, with the view from the Hill, thank you. Lanny Davis, taking a break out of your busy day and your day working to join us on The Beat. I appreciate it. What I'm going to do right now is turn right to a federal prosecutor that many of you know, MSNBC analyst, former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance. Thanks for being here tonight, Joyce.
Good to be with you, Ari.
Nice to see you. You, at least for the last few minutes, have been a Beat viewer right along with our audience, watching all of that. So
in the room where it happens.
In the room where it happens, as Hamilton would say. What do you make of what we just heard there?
There is so much to unpack here, but I focused on a phrase that Lanny Davis used, where he talked about Michael Cohen, and he referred back and said Michael did what he understood the president wanted him to do. And that takes us a little bit back to the core of the testimony that we thought for a while we would get to hear Cohen give in front of the House. It looks like he may now give that testimony in front of the Senate, but they tend to have closed-door proceedings. I don't think that we'll publicly see any testimony that he gives on the Senate side. But this is a very important question. We got caught up in the BuzzFeed controversy, which was about whether or not the president had directly ordered Cohen to lie on the Hill. Now we have Mr. Davis walking that back a little bit. Maybe not walking it back, maybe saying what was always said, and that Cohen was doing what he understood Trump wanted him to do. And legally, that too would be a crime. I thought that was an interesting comment.
Very notable. And also the big question of, as you put it, whether you're going to speak in public. And in Michael Cohen's case, the prison deadline looms large. Last night on the show, we had several other Mueller witnesses, and I put this to them, this question about whether Cohen should step up and do this. Take a look at their responses. Do you think, in your opinion, that he should step up and speak to Congress before he goes to jail?
I really don't have any opinion on it.
I think he should.
I really couldn't care less. I'd like him to go to jail as soon as possible and stay there a long time.
The more openness, the better.
That's the view of other people who've tangled with this. Did you hear Lanny Davis tonight on the beat to be implying that this is going to get done before prison or not?
I think he was equivocal, right? He pointed out that he wasn't a criminal defense lawyer. It was a question that had to be discussed. But if you're a prosecutor, you don't want Cohen to testify. You never like to see someone that you might have to put on the witness stand in a trial of your own, giving testimony in another forum, particularly here a risky one.
Are you suggesting this may be one of the only issues that Donald Trump and Bob Mueller agree on in this probe tonight?
I think we might have found the core agreement.
The overlapping Venn diagram is narrow.
It's
but
very small.
It involves Mueller not wanting to give away any signals and Trump not wanting to have the world see whatever it is, because we don't actually know. Whatever it is Michael Cohen would say.
You know, that's right, but ultimately Mueller will win here because this testimony will come out in one form or another, maybe when Mueller issues his report. All the president can do is delay it. And as you know, as a lawyer, trying to delay a witness using intimidation is a crime.
Right, and that goes back to the heart of this and some of what I was very surprised to hear some of what Lanny said in his allegations about the fear and the things they're worried about. That's a personal feeling. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.